lone rancher for years, until he found two Apache girls hanged by Stepfather. John Whitaker had lived on the same ranch in the Arizona desert for almost 10 years. The land stretched for miles, covered in dry grass, cacti, and the occasional Joshua tree. From the edge of his property, he could see the distant mountains rising like silent sentinels, their peaks glowing orange in the early morning sun. For many people, this place might have seemed empty or lonely, but John loved it. He loved the quiet, the endless sky, and the freedom to live without anyone telling him how to live. Every morning, John woke before the sun. He would put on his worn boots, grab his wide-brimmed hat, and step outside to breathe in the cool, crisp air. The desert had a way of making him feel alive. Even though it was hot during the day and cold at night, he never complained. Each sound of the wind, each bird that called from the rocks, and every rustle in the bushes felt like a companion. John was not lonely. He had his routines, his land, and the animals that shared it with him. The ranch was not small, but it was not very big either. There were a few wooden buildings, one for storing tools and supplies, another small barn for his horses, and the modest house where he lived. He had built it with his own hands, slowly, piece by piece. It was simple, but it was home. Inside, the walls were plain, decorated only with a few photographs of landscapes and the horses he loved. The furniture was simple too, mostly wooden tables and chairs, but it had character and warmth. The house smelled faintly of wood and earth, a scent John found comforting. John was not a man who needed much from life. He spent his mornings feeding the horses, checking fences, and walking across his land to make sure everything was in order. He knew every inch of it, every rock, every tree, and every hidden path. Sometimes he would sit on the hill behind the house just to watch the sunrise or sunset. These were moments of peace he cherished. He often thought about the past, about the life he had left behind before he came to the desert, but he never regretted his choice. This life, simple and quiet, suited him perfectly. One of John's favorite routines was taking care of the horses. He had a small herd of 4, each with its own personality. There was Star, a white mare who loved to run, Dusty, a brown gelding who was calm and steady, Shadow, a black stallion who was a bit wild but smart, and Ginger, a small pony who was gentle and friendly. John would spend hours brushing them, talking to them, and sometimes just sitting near them in silence. They were his friends, and in their company he felt a kind of calm that the world outside could never give him. Life on the ranch was not always easy. Water was scarce, and the sun could be harsh. In the summer, temperatures often rose above 100 degrees, making every task a challenge. In the winter, the nights could be bitterly cold. Yet John accepted it all. He had learned to read the weather by the clouds and the wind, to know when to prepare for storms and when it was safe to travel across the land. These skills were not just useful, they were necessary for survival. John was used to being alone, but he was not completely isolated. Sometimes people from the nearby town would come by for supplies or advice. They would bring news from the outside world. But most of the time, John preferred to listen and nod politely rather than engage in long conversations. He had his own life, his own pace, and he did not want it disturbed. Still, he was always willing to help if someone needed it. If a traveler's horse was sick or a neighbor's fence had fallen, John would lend a hand without question. Kindness, for him, was a quiet action, not something for attention. One hot summer morning, John was walking along the edge of his property, checking the fences that separated his land from the desert. The sun had just risen, casting a golden light across the land. The air was still, except for the occasional sound of a bird or the rustle of a small animal moving through the bushes. Everything seemed normal, calm, and peaceful. Yet, as he walked further along the path, he heard something that did not belong. It was a faint sound, a noise so quiet he almost thought he imagined it. John stopped and listened carefully. The sound came again, soft but unmistakable. It was not the wind, nor a bird, nor an animal. It was a human sound, a faint cry, almost like someone calling for help. His heart began to beat faster. He was a man used to the desert, but this was unusual. No one came out here without reason, and the area was far from the nearest road. He moved cautiously, his boots making soft crunching sounds on the dry earth, his eyes scanning every bush, tree, and rock. The closer he got, the more the sound grew clearer. It was a human voice, but weak and frightened. John's instincts told him something was wrong. He was not a man to panic, but he knew the desert could hide secrets and dangers. He moved quickly, yet carefully, toward the noise. His mind raced with questions. Who could be here? Were they lost, hurt, or in trouble? The thought of someone in need stirred something deep inside him. He had lived alone for years, but he could not ignore a call for help. As he approached the source of the sound, he noticed movement near a small grove of trees. The shadows of the branches danced on the ground in the early morning light. John's heart beat faster as he moved closer, every step filled with a mix of fear and curiosity. What he would see next was something he could never have expected, something that would change the calm routine of his life forever. When he reached the trees, John stopped. His eyes widened in shock, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had learned long ago that panic never helped. He took a deep breath and stepped closer, ready to face whatever was hidden in the shadows. The desert was quiet again, but the feeling in the air had changed. There was a heaviness, a silence that pressed down on him, making him more alert than ever. John had lived alone for so long that he thought he had seen everything the desert could offer. Yet, in that moment, he realized how little he truly knew. Life on the ranch had been peaceful, predictable, and simple. He had grown used to the quiet, the routines, and the safety of his own knowledge. But the sound he had heard reminded him that the world was bigger than his ranch, that life could be fragile and unpredictable, and that sometimes, even in the most isolated places, people could face dangers they could not escape on their own. He moved forward slowly, his eyes scanning every shadow, every tree, and every small space. The sun rose higher, casting more light on the ground and revealing details he had not noticed at first. He felt a mixture of fear, curiosity, and responsibility. He could not turn away. His years of solitude had taught him to survive, to act carefully, and to respect the land, but they had also taught him to care. And now care meant moving forward, discovering the truth, and facing whatever lay hidden in the grove. For John, the ranch had always been a place of peace, a sanctuary where he could live life on his own terms. But on this morning, the desert reminded him that peace could be fragile, and life could change in an instant. He had lived alone for years, enjoyed the silence, and embraced the simplicity of his world. Yet, something about the faint sound he heard made him realize that life's quiet moments could be interrupted, that solitude could be broken, and that even in a place as wide and empty as the desert, people could stumble into situations they were unprepared for. John's hands tightened on his hat as he took another step forward. The grove awaited, and so did the answers. He did not know what he would find, but he knew he could not turn away. The desert had given him years of solitude, freedom, and peace. Now it was giving him a new challenge, one that would test his courage, his instincts, and his heart. He was ready as any man could be, to face the unknown and do what needed to be done. John stepped carefully through the dry grass, moving closer to the small grove of trees. His heart beat faster with every step. The sound he had heard earlier had faded, replaced by silence, but John knew he was close. The desert was quiet, yet it seemed to hold its own secrets, as if it was waiting for him to discover them. He paused for a moment, listening carefully, trying to catch any movement or sound. The wind whispered through the branches above him, making soft, rustling noises. Birds called from a distance, and a few lizards scurried across the ground. But there was something else, too, a faint sense that he was not alone. John had lived alone for many years, and he knew how to stay calm. He had learned to watch, to listen, and to trust his instincts. But this time, there was a different feeling in the air. It was heavy, quiet, and serious. He took a deep breath and stepped closer to the center of the grove. The sunlight filtered through the branches, casting long shadows across the ground. It was a beautiful morning, yet John felt an unusual tension, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. As he moved carefully, he noticed small signs that something unusual had happened here. There were footprints in the soft dirt, not just one pair, but several, some bigger and some smaller. The smaller prints looked like they belonged to children. He knelt down and studied them closely. They were fresh enough that he could see the impressions of tiny shoes. John's stomach tightened. Something had happened here recently, and it involved children. He continued moving forward, following the tracks as they led him deeper into the grove. The trees grew closer together, their branches tangled and forming a natural wall around him. The sunlight became patchy, and the shadows grew longer. John could hear the soft chirping of birds high above, but there was no other sound. No voices, no movement. The silence was almost complete, broken only by the occasional creak of a branch or the rustle of leaves. Then John saw them. Two small figures were there, and for a moment he could not believe his eyes. They were still hanging from the branches of a low tree. The sight made him freeze in shock. His mind raced, trying to understand what he was seeing. The girls were very young, probably around 10 or 12 years old. Their clothes were dusty and torn, as if they had been wandering in the desert for a while. Their hair was tangled and their faces were pale. John's first thought was to rush forward, to lift the girls from the tree and check if they were all right. But he stopped himself. He had to stay calm, or he might make a mistake. He could not see clearly what had happened, and rushing in without thinking could cause problems. He took a deep breath and studied the situation carefully. The girls were hanging gently from the tree, not struggling or moving. It seemed that they had been there for some time. His heart ached as he looked at them. These were children, and they were in trouble. They needed help, and John knew it. He moved closer, talking to them softly, trying to reassure them. "It's okay," he said in a calm voice. "I'm here to help. You're safe now." The girls did not respond, but their small bodies seemed to relax slightly. John gently untangled the ropes, careful not to hurt them. Once they were free, he lifted them one by one, supporting their weight as he carried them to a nearby patch of soft grass. The girls sat on the ground, shivering slightly. John offered them water from his canteen. They drank slowly, and John watched them carefully, making sure they were not injured. Their eyes were wide with fear, but slowly they began to calm down. John spoke softly to them, asking their names and where they had come from. They did not answer at first, but eventually one of them whispered, "Our stepfather. He left us. We ran away." John listened carefully. He did not rush them or push for details. He knew that the girls needed to feel safe before they could talk. He offered them some bread and fruit he had in his bag. They ate slowly, their small hands trembling. John kept talking gently, telling them that everything was going to be all right. He explained that he would help them and that they were no longer alone. As he spoke, John looked around the grove. He noticed signs that the girls had been hiding here for a while. There were small piles of sticks and leaves used as makeshift bedding. A few pieces of torn cloth lay scattered on the ground. It was clear that they had been living here, trying to stay out of sight. John felt a deep sadness. These children had been forced to survive on their own in a harsh, lonely place. It was unfair, and it made him more determined to help them. Once the girls had eaten and drank, John helped them to stand. They were small and weak, and he supported them as they walked toward his ranch. The journey was slow, but they moved steadily. Along the way, John kept talking softly, telling them about his ranch, the horses, and the animals they would meet. He wanted them to feel safe and to trust him. By the time they reached the house, the sun was high in the sky. The heat of the desert was strong, but the girls seemed more comfortable now that they were with someone who cared. Inside the house, John guided them to the small living room. He had prepared blankets and pillows on the floor. The girls sat quietly, still wary, but beginning to relax. John sat across from them, keeping his voice calm and gentle. He explained that they were safe and that he would help them figure out what to do next. The girls listened quietly, their eyes following his every move. They were scared, but they also felt a sense of relief. For the first time in a long while, they were not alone. John spent the rest of the afternoon talking to the girls, listening to their story as best as he could without forcing them to speak. He learned that they had come from a nearby town and that life at home had been very difficult. Their stepfather had not been kind, and they had run away to find safety. John felt a mix of sadness and determination. These children had faced challenges no child should ever face, and now it was his responsibility to make sure they were safe and cared for. As evening approached, John brought the girls food for dinner. He had prepared a simple meal, but it was warm and filling. They ate quietly, still taking in their surroundings. John talked to them about the ranch, the horses, and the desert. He told them stories about the animals, the plants, and the history of the land. The girls began to smile slightly, their fear slowly giving way to curiosity and interest. John was careful to keep the mood light and comforting, creating an environment where they could feel safe. After dinner, John showed the girls the horses. They were amazed at the animals, and their eyes lit up with wonder. John let them pet Star and Dusty, and even Shadow came close, curious about the new visitors. The girls laughed softly as Ginger, the small pony, nuzzled their hands. For a moment, the tension of the day lifted, replaced by a sense of wonder and joy. John watched them carefully, feeling a deep satisfaction. He knew that small moments like this could help heal fear and bring comfort. As night fell, John helped the girls settle on the floor with blankets and pillows. He left a small lantern nearby, casting a soft glow across the room. The desert outside was quiet, the stars twinkling above like tiny lights in the vast sky. John sat nearby, keeping watch, ready to respond if they needed anything. He felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. The day had been long and challenging, but he had succeeded in helping the girls find safety. Before they fell asleep, John spoke softly to them. "You're safe now," he said. "Nothing bad will happen here. You can rest, and tomorrow we will figure out everything else together." The girls nodded slightly, their eyes closing slowly. John stayed with them until he was sure they were asleep. Then He quietly stepped outside, looking at the stars and breathing in the cool desert air. John knew that the challenges were not over. He had taken the first step in helping the girls, but there were still many questions to answer. How had they come to be in the desert? Who would help them now? And how could he make sure they were truly safe? These thoughts filled his mind as he looked out over the land he had called home for so many years. The desert was peaceful again, but John knew that life could be unpredictable and that the next days would require courage, patience, and care. Despite the uncertainty, John felt a deep sense of purpose. He had lived alone for years, and he had learned to trust his instincts and his heart. Now he would use those skills to help these children, to protect them, and to guide them safely through the challenges ahead. For the first time in a long while, John felt that his quiet life on the ranch had a new meaning. He was no longer just a man living in the desert. He was a protector, a guide, and a friend to those who needed him most. The next morning, John woke early as usual. The desert was quiet, and the sun had just started to rise over the distant mountains. He stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the cool morning air. Today was going to be an important day. The girls had slept peacefully through the night, and for the first time, John felt a small sense of hope that they might begin to feel safe. But he knew that simply keeping them on the ranch would not be enough. He had to think about the next steps. John prepared breakfast, keeping it simple but filling. He set a plate in front of the girls and smiled gently. "Eat well," he said. "We have a long day ahead, and I want you to have energy." The girls nodded quietly. Their eyes, once wide with fear, now carried a small glimmer of trust. They ate slowly, tasting the warmth of the food, and for a moment, they were simply children again. Not children who had been lost and afraid. After breakfast, John sat down with a notepad and pen. He began to think carefully about what needed to be done. First, the girls needed safety. That was the most important thing. Next, he had to involve the authorities. Even though he had lived alone for years, he knew the law existed to protect people in situations like this. It would be difficult, he thought, but it was necessary. He could not handle everything on his own, no matter how capable he was. John decided to call the sheriff of the nearby town. The phone line at the ranch was old, and sometimes the connection was weak, but he was able to reach the office after a few attempts. The sheriff listened carefully as John explained what had happened. He spoke slowly, clearly, describing the grove, the footprints, and the condition of the girls. The sheriff responded with calm authority, promising to send someone immediately to investigate. While waiting for help to arrive, John continued to care for the girls. He gave them clean water, helped them wash up as best as he could, and encouraged them to rest a little more. He did not ask them too many questions at once. He knew that gaining their trust was more important than forcing answers. Slowly, he began to hear their voices. They whispered small stories about their lives, about the places they had been, and about their hopes for the future. Each word was precious to John, a reminder that these were young lives that deserved care and kindness. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, John went outside to check the horses and the fences. The desert was bright and hot now, and the air shimmered with heat. He thought about the events of the previous day and night. The girls had survived on their own in the desert for some time. That meant they were strong, smart, and resourceful. He admired them quietly. It was clear that despite the difficulties they had faced, they were still determined to survive. By mid-morning, a sheriff's deputy arrived at the ranch. John guided the deputy to the grove and then to the house where the girls were resting. The deputy spoke kindly to them, introducing himself and explaining that they were now safe and that they would be taken care of. The girls were hesitant at first, but John stood nearby, giving them silent reassurance. Slowly, they began to respond, and their faces relaxed a little. John spoke with the deputy privately, explaining everything he had seen and done. He described the footprints, the condition of the girls, and their statements about running away from home. The deputy listened carefully, taking notes and asking questions with patience. John realized that the law could be slow, but it was thorough. It might take time for the investigation to proceed, but he had done the right thing by contacting the authorities. While the girls were being cared for inside, John walked to a small hill on the edge of the ranch. From there, he could see the mountains, the desert, and the horizon stretching endlessly. He thought about the girls and their lives. He wondered what the future would hold for them. He knew that today was only the beginning of a long process. They would need support, care, and guidance for many months, perhaps even years. But he also knew that small acts of kindness could change lives, and that was what he intended to give them. Later in the day, the sheriff arrived personally to speak with John. They discussed the situation in detail. John provided everything he knew about the grove, the girl's condition, and the footprints he had observed. The sheriff assured him that a social worker would be involved to ensure the girl's safety, and that the matter would be handled with care. John felt relief, knowing that the girls would now have professional support. As evening approached, John prepared a simple dinner for everyone. He served the girls and sat with them, talking about the ranch and the animals. They asked questions about the horses, about the desert, and about life on the ranch. John answered with patience and detail, sharing stories and facts that would help them feel more comfortable. He noticed that their laughter, quiet at first, began to emerge more freely. The sound was small but precious, and it reminded him of why he had taken action. That night, after the girls had gone to bed, John sat alone on the porch. The stars sparkled above, and the desert was quiet once more. He thought about the day's events. He realized that helping these children had changed something in him. The ranch, which had been a place of solitude and routine, had become a place of responsibility and care. He felt a sense of purpose he had not felt in years. Over the next few days, the social worker and sheriff returned to the ranch several times. They spoke with the girls, making sure they felt safe and understood. John continued to support them, offering guidance, comfort, and reassurance. He helped them with small tasks, showing them the horses, the plants, and the ways of the desert. Each day he watched as the girls grew more confident and more comfortable. The fear in their eyes gradually faded, replaced by curiosity and trust. John also began to take notes of his own. He wanted to remember every detail of what had happened, both for the authorities and for the future. He documented the girls' arrival, their condition, and their statements. He kept track of the small improvements he observed each day. It was a careful and patient process, but John understood that details mattered. The law needed facts, and the girls deserved a story told accurately and honestly. During this time, John reflected on his own life. He had chosen the desert for its peace and quiet, and he had found it. Yet the arrival of the girls had reminded him that life was unpredictable. Solitude had its comforts, but it also had its limits. Sometimes being alone meant being ready to face challenges that could not be avoided. He realized that true strength was not only in surviving alone, but also in helping others when they needed it most. One afternoon, John took the girls for a short walk along a safe trail on the ranch. They moved slowly, enjoying the sights and sounds of the desert. Birds flew overhead and small animals scurried through the bushes. John pointed out interesting plants, explained how the desert survived the heat, and shared stories of the land's history. The girls listened intently, asking questions and sometimes giggling at small jokes John made. It was a simple activity, but it was powerful. They were learning to trust, to feel safe, and to enjoy life again. By the end of the week, the girls' confidence had grown significantly. They were eating well, sleeping better, and beginning to speak more openly. John felt proud of their progress. He knew that there would still be difficult moments ahead, but he also knew that small steps could lead to great improvements. The desert had been harsh, but it had also provided a place of safety where these children could begin to heal. John continued to assist the authorities with their investigation. He provided every detail he could remember, helping them piece together the events that had led to the girls' situation. The sheriff and social worker valued his honesty, his careful observations, and his willingness to act. John realized that his years of living alone had made him observant and patient, qualities that were now helping in a very real way. At night, after the girls were asleep, John often sat quietly on the porch. He thought about the day, about the small improvements, and about the journey ahead. He knew that the coming weeks would require patience, careful planning, and ongoing support. But he also knew that he could make a difference. For the first time in years, he felt that his life had a purpose beyond his own comfort and solitude. He had become a protector, a guide, and a friend to those who needed him most. The weeks passed slowly on the ranch, and John Whitaker found a new rhythm in his life. The girls, who had arrived frightened and unsure, were growing stronger and more comfortable each day. They began to laugh more freely, ask questions, and explore the ranch with curiosity. John watched them with a quiet sense of pride, knowing that he had helped them take their first steps toward healing. The ranch, which had once been only a place of solitude, had become a place of safety, hope, and growth. John continued to assist the authorities, giving them every detail he could remember. He knew that the girls' story had to be told clearly so that they could be protected in the long term. He met with the sheriff, social workers, and even a counselor who came to the ranch to talk with the girls. Each meeting helped the authorities understand the situation better, and each time, John made sure the girls felt safe and supported. He became a bridge between their world and the outside world, offering kindness, guidance, and protection. The girls started helping around the ranch in small ways. They fed the chickens, watered the plants, and even helped with brushing the horses. At first, they were hesitant, unsure of their abilities, but John encouraged them gently. "Take your time," he would say. "There's no rush. Just enjoy learning." Slowly, they began to gain confidence, discovering skills they had never known they had. The ranch, once quiet and solitary, was now full of life and energy. One morning, as the sun rose over the mountains, John decided to take the girls on a longer walk along one of the safe trails on his property. They moved slowly, admiring the desert's beauty and the animals they spotted along the way. Birds sang from the branches, rabbits darted through the grass, and the horses grazed peacefully in the distance. John told stories about the desert's history, the animals, and the stars that would shine at night. The girls listened intently, their faces lit with wonder and excitement. During the walk, the girls began to share more of their thoughts and feelings. They spoke about their hopes for the future, the things they wished they could do, and even the small dreams they had almost forgotten. John listened carefully, offering encouragement and support. He realized that their courage had inspired him in return. He had spent years in solitude, but these children had reminded him of the importance of human connection, kindness, and hope. As the day ended, they returned to the ranch, tired but happy. John prepared a simple dinner, and they ate together under the soft glow of a lantern. The girls laughed over small stories from the day, and John joined in, enjoying their joy. It was a quiet celebration of progress of trust, and of a new beginning. For John, moments like these were more meaningful than any wealth or comfort he had ever known. The authorities continued their work, and soon it was clear that the girls would be placed in a safe and supportive environment for the longer term. John knew that he could not take care of them forever, but he also knew that he had given them something invaluable: safety, comfort, and trust. He had been the first person to show them that someone cared and that would stay with them always. Before the girls moved to their new home, John wanted to give them a small gift, something to remember the ranch by. He took them to the grove where he had first found them, now clean, peaceful, and full of soft sunlight. Together, they planted a few wildflowers and small shrubs. John told them, "These are for you. Whenever you see them, remember that you are strong, brave, and that you have a safe place in the world." The girls smiled, their eyes bright with gratitude. It was a simple gesture, but it carried a deep meaning for all of them. On the day of their departure, John helped a social worker guide the girls to the car that would take them to their new home. They hugged him tightly, and John felt a mix of sadness and pride. He had grown attached to them, but he knew this was the right step. The girls had gained strength, trust, and confidence, and now they were ready to move forward with new support, new opportunities, and a brighter future. After they left, John stood on the porch of his house, looking out over the ranch. The desert stretched endlessly before him, quiet and beautiful as always. He felt a profound sense of satisfaction, knowing that he had made a difference in the lives of two young people. The ranch, once only a place of solitude, had become a place of hope and healing. John understood that even small actions could have a big impact, and he felt grateful for the chance to help. In the following weeks, John visited the grove often. He maintained the plants the girls had planted and occasionally added more flowers. The grove had become a small memorial, a reminder of resilience, courage, and the power of kindness. Travelers who passed by sometimes paused to admire the flowers and the peaceful setting. They did not know the full story, but they could feel the care and thought that had gone into the space. It became a quiet symbol of hope in the desert. John returned to his routines, feeding the horses, checking fences, and caring for the land. But he carried a new sense of purpose. The ranch was still a place of solitude, but it was now also a place of compassion, care, and connection. He had learned that life could change suddenly, that challenges could appear when least expected, and that the right actions could make a profound difference. Months later, John received letters from the social worker about the girls' progress. They were doing well, adjusting to their new home, and even attending school regularly. John smiled as he read each letter. He felt a deep pride in their courage and resilience. The girls had grown stronger, and he had been a small part of their journey. Their success reminded him that even in the quietest corners of the world, human kindness could make a lasting impact. On quiet evenings, John would sit on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. The desert was calm, the wind soft, and the stars bright. He often thought about the girls and the time they had spent on the ranch. Their laughter, curiosity, and courage had left a permanent mark on him. John realized that his life of solitude had prepared him for this moment. He had been ready to act, ready to care, and ready to offer hope. Sometimes travelers or neighbors would pass by the ranch, noticing the small grove of flowers and the peaceful land. John would tell them the story quietly, emphasizing the lessons of courage, trust, and kindness. He wanted everyone to understand that even small acts of care could change lives. The desert had taught him patience and observation, but the girls had taught him compassion, courage, and the power of human connection. Years passed, and John continued to live on his ranch. still caring for the land and the animals. He occasionally received letters from the girls, now older, sharing their successes and expressing gratitude for the safety and support he had given them. Each letter reminded John of the impact one person could have, of the difference that kindness and careful action could make in someone's life. Though John remained a man of the desert, enjoying its quiet beauty and freedom, he knew that his life had been enriched in ways he had never expected. The ranch was no longer just a place of solitude. It was a place of memory, of hope, and of the enduring value of care. John understood that life could be unpredictable, but it could also be deeply rewarding when he chose to act with compassion. In the quiet moments when the wind rustled through the trees and the stars sparkled above, John felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. He had faced a challenge, helped 2 young lives, and created a legacy of care in the desert. The ranch had become more than a home. It had become a symbol of resilience, hope, and the enduring power of human kindness. John Whitaker had once lived alone, content with the simplicity of his life. But through his actions, he had learned that true strength lay not only in solitude, but also in the willingness to help, to protect, and to care for others. The desert remained vast, quiet, and beautiful, but it now held a deeper meaning for him. It was a place where lives could change, hope could grow, and kindness could endure. And so, John continued to live on the ranch, tending the land, caring for the animals, and remembering the girls who had taught him so much about courage, trust, and the quiet power of human goodness. Though life was still simple, it was also rich, meaningful, and full of connection, a lasting reminder that even in the most remote places, acts of care could leave a permanent mark on the world.